Good evening. Tonight, Peter Hindle and myself, Jerry Irwin, are here with Hartford Public Access at Peppercorns on Main Street in Hartford. Tonight we have President Jay Williams of the Hartford Foundation for Giving. Jay, thank you very much for joining us. And you know, the first time I heard about this, and we talked about this off camera, was from the Hartford Whalers Booster Club. That's how I realized the Hartford Foundation for Giving helped the Hartford Whalers Booster Club with their scholarship fund. So you coming in as the new president as of July, correct?
That's correct.
What? A little background on yourself. You came from the Obama administration.
Yes.
You've been here at Peppercorns, as we have found out, and you are now living in Hartford.
We're living in West Hartford
Okay.
presently and looking for a home in the city of Hartford.
Yep. It's neat. Peter works in Hartford. I work outside of Hartford, but I used to work in Hartford. And back when I worked in Hartford, it was such a vibrant city. I drove limousines. Frank Sinatra came, did concerts, a lot of arts and entertainment. We believe, Peter and I, that Hartford has the potential to be one of those cities again.
I agree.
What have you seen so far in your short time here in Hartford?
Well, there still is a vibrancy about this community. Certainly the challenges oftentimes seem to overshadow the vibrancy of the community, but the diversity, the culture, the history of this community in the first 4 months that my family and I have been here are very appealing and remind us a lot about our time in Youngstown, Ohio. So it's allowed us to feel very much at home, and the people that we have met, the organizations that are at work here to help reinvigorate the vibrancy that you spoke of. It will be different. It's a different city, but different doesn't mean inferior. So, lots of assets, lots of opportunities in the face of the challenges. So it's been a great first 4 months for my family now.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's interesting that you took the Hartford Public Giving Foundation. When you take the 28 communities and Hartford, I mean, that's really the dream that Jerry and I have too. Is that we regionalize and people are helping each other within communities, and it's really because Hartford is only 17 square miles,
right.
And that's what makes it a little bit different of a city.
Yep.
But in reality, with those communities do rely on Hartford, and those Hartford does rely on the communities. But what was the process of bringing you in? Was this something that you actively sought, or were you sought? How did that come to be about? Because I mean, granted, you were in Youngstown, Ohio.
Right.
Used to be the mayor there. So how did that process come about? You getting to here?
Sure. So I'd been a mayor of Youngstown, Ohio I was in my 6th year, and as a matter of fact, during my time as mayor of Youngstown, I would often draw similarities between other mid-sized cities like Hartford and others across the country. But I left during my 2nd term as mayor to accept an appointment in the Obama administration, spent 6 years in Washington, D.C., between the Auto Recovery Office, the White House, and then most recently the Economic Development Administration, during which time I had occasion to travel to Hartford for some of the investments that we were doing, 2 or 3 occasions. So the Obama administration ends. I'm a political appointee, so we knew that the last day of the president's term was our last day. Took some time to contemplate what I wanted to do next. And the foundation was in the midst of a presidential search. I was contacted by the executive recruiter who was leading that search. We struck up a conversation. She began to talk about the Hartford Foundation, the city of Hartford, the greater Hartford region, the 28 other communities outside of Hartford. And because I had been here, there was immediately an interest, and the interest grew as she started talking about where the board was hoping to position the foundation. With my background in community and economic development, having been the mayor of Youngstown, Ohio, which has a lot of similarities to Hartford, I got very interested, very intrigued. They invited me in for a series of interviews. Each of those interviews, I got more excited about the prospect of a wonderful organization like the foundation, the work that it's doing, the resources, the regional upside opportunities here in the face of very real challenges, and ultimately that led to an offer to join the foundation as its president, and here I am, along with my family 4 months later.
Well, it's great. Peter and I have grown up here, going to sporting events, concerts downtown. Hartford has so much to offer, and you hear. I work at a university, so I hear of the young people that want Hartford to be more than what it is.
Right.
They want to live downtown. They want to have everything at their fingertips. My son lives in Brooklyn, New York, where everything's just outside your front door.
Right.
Hartford has that potential. I think with the Capital Region Development Authority doing what they've done with the apartments downtown, they're trying to spin that new modern look to Hartford,
Right.
and to get the young, vibrant community back into Hartford, to get the nightlife. And it's not a 9 to 5 city. We know that because we meet with these people that live, work, love Hartford. They tell us what goes on in Hartford. The one thing Hartford has to do, and Peter and I agree with this, is market themselves more.
Yeah.
Put it out there that, Hartford Stage has this, Bushnell has this, the XL Center has this, but there's other hidden gems that Hartford really doesn't, or the suburban families don't know about.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hartford has to tell its story, and that's where I think my experiences in Youngstown, Ohio, of a similarly situated community that was defined by an industry for so many years, the rise, the fall of that industry, that finally came together with a vision and a plan that really galvanized the community to move. Hartford, it needs to do the same thing, and I'm eager to have discussions with the city about how the foundation can help perhaps catalyze that notion of a vision and an approach that defines Hartford looking forward, and not simply of what Hartford had. You also brought up a good point that the vibrancy is about a new generation of young people, but it's also needs to be approached from multiple facets. There are, folks that I've met and talked to during the course of my 4 months here who are of other generations, who look fondly and remember Hartford in one regard, but are rediscovering Hartford themselves, are moving back to the city, empty nesters whose children have gone off to college and are now making their way, and they're like, we enjoy and want to have things outside of our door. So the makings of that are already underway here. I myself would love to live downtown, work downtown. I often ride the bus into work because having spent 6 years in Washington, D.C., you see, elements of that here. It's different, won't be on the same scale, but those, the trappings of that do exist here in the city.
It's interesting. You look back, and there's several pages on Facebook and social media that relive the past of Hartford, whether it's the G. Fox building downtown. And I think to a certain degree, and this is my opinion only, we have to remember what Hartford
Absolutely
did.
Yes.
And we have to embrace what Hartford
Yes.
did, and maybe even bring back some of those stores like G. Fox, Sage Allen, not so much those stores, but bring back that retail value to Hartford. Instead of being the insurance capital, make it a holistic approach.
Much more diverse, retail, quality of life. You got great educational institutions. You have, again, the Bushnell Center for the Performing Arts, the Bushnell Park, Hartford Stage. So many great assets that can be leveraged to create a new sense of vibrancy. And you're right, celebrating the past, but not getting stuck there. And that's often where these cities find themselves stuck in the past, not able to get beyond that. Yeah, you're not going to have retail centers across the country disappeared from downtown. There are very few communities that have retail core sectors in their downtown with the arrival of the malls decades ago. But what you are starting to see are people are now returning to the cities. They don't want to go out to a farm that was 100 acres that you put a mall on with 30 acres of parking and you're going. They want the quality and the characteristics that you get from the shops and the main streets, and are trying to recreate that in many ways, whereas that was a natural part of city living and a natural part of Hartford. So to the extent that that can be brought back in a way that is, forward-looking and modern and appealing to all generations is, where those communities are starting to find. Some communities are starting to find success. Many communities.
And that's what I see. I see Hartford transforming to a new town green. Your town green is now transforming and evolving to something really special now.
Right. And I love the fact that that you're someone from outside of Hartford, because Hartford could use a fresh pair of eyes, and someone, looking at these things in different ways. seeing things that other people don't see that have been here forever. That happens. I mean, we do it with our own families. You know, that someone will say something about your mother, and you go, I didn't even. I mean, I know this woman better than anybody. Right. So you know, that to me is very important. And just in the few minutes we've been talking to you, I can tell you got such a grasp on it for such a short amount of time. So. You know, best of luck to you and everything that you're going to do going forward, and we're excited that you're here. So.
I appreciate it. You know, and oftentimes these communities, we can be our own harshest critics or our own worst enemies. And you know, I come not as a know-it-all sort of new guy on the block, but having lived this in Youngstown, Ohio, I can come with a perspective that is, you know, I've got some street cred coming from Youngstown. I mean, we know economics. I've seen it all. Yeah. So coming here, being able to say I've lived that, and there is another perspective that we can have, and really taking an approach that you know, moves the community forward is something I enjoy. So it's a collective effort. Happy to have the platform of the foundation, but you know what you guys have been doing here. You know, in terms of your work, you can I say that you can't say the Whalers. But
I can say anything we want.
Right. But again, I mean, I've enjoyed even before I met you tonight.
Yep.
I was reading about the legislation that was passed for the license plates. Right. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I'm like coming like, that's you guys. I mean, I'm meeting a couple of celebrities
two
here.
average Joes. Yeah. And you get your hands dirty on something, and you make something snap, and it's good for everybody.
Absolutely.
So, but as you know, with the Hartford Foundation for Giving, it takes grassroots organizations to get things done. Right. It makes, you know, you make the noise out there, people start to listen. And, you know, for the Hartford Foundation, you are supporting 28 other towns in their effort to promote themselves and get some money for their communities. Right. And, you know, I must admit that I've heard Youngstown a couple times in my life. Well, this year, because I work at CCSU, the CCSU Blue Devils played the Youngstown, Ohio
the Penguins, Youngstown State Penguins.
And we won't discuss the score.
This was in what sport?
Football.
Football, okay.
Yep. The good news is we took an absolute lumping by Youngstown. Yes. But since then, Central went 7-0. They won the NEC conference, and this Saturday they're going to go for number 8 in a row. And they had a successful season after the lumping from Youngstown. So,
my alma mater.
Jay, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. We welcome you to the area.
Thank you both.
And you know what? Amongst all else, Jay should realize that bringing back the whale is the biggest thing he has to think about. 28 cities and towns supported the whale.
A lot of season tickets.
I do that. I'm a hero. I can quit while I'm ahead.
You're good.
I do that. I just go out on top.
That's right.
I got it. We'll carry you down Main Street.
That's right.
Whatever you want.
I got it. I appreciate it.
So thank you very much to Jay Williams. Welcome to Hartford. Peter Hindle, Jerry Owen for Hartford Public Access TV. Have a great night.
Okay, good evening, and tonight is November 15th, 2017. Welcome to LWL Hartford here at Peppercorns Grill, and we'd like to thank Peppercorns Grill for making this venue available to us. LWL Hartford is living, working, loving Hartford and its Knowledge Corridor region, which we define and many other organizations define as a 7-county bi-state region with a population of over 2.77 million people. It's the 20th largest market in the United States. It's also known as Metro Hartford, Springfield, New Haven. And come May of 2018, just around the corner, we will have our own new commuter rail system, which will be operating at its inception with 17 round-trip trains, followed over time as market warrants. It'll be expanding to 25 trains. So it'll be really tying the region together more than just I-91. We're going to have much more, and we share in our airport as well. So that's our Knowledge Corridor region, and LWL Hartford. The purpose of the organization is to promote the interests of the city of Hartford, its residents, its businesses, to promote economic development, to promote the cultural interests of the community, and also societal interests. And we have a wide variety of programs. We do this program once a month, every month throughout the year. We do not stop for any given month, even for the holidays. So you can tell we're a week or so before Thanksgiving right now.
I thought Christmas.
Christmas, yes, some Christmas decorations as well. We're getting those out. Thank you, Donna. So we do this every month. We've been doing it for over 5 years. The steering committee consists of Jim Boucher, from executive with Capital Workforce Partners. Also, Dr. Tom Swar, who's right here. He teaches at Yale. He's also a retired engineer. Other people's Jennifer Cassidy. She's Executive Director of Business for Downtown Hartford. She also is an advocate for the Asylum Hill neighborhood. You still are, correct, right? C. Peterson. She does it. She wears multiple hats. We all do. C. Peterson was here somewhere. Thought I saw C. No. C. Peterson, who is someone who's an advocate for the performing arts. She's in that business, and I think she's just relocating her offices to the Theater Works building. I thought that just came out. So congratulations to C on that. Jeff Stewart, who is with the Connecticut DOT, is a member of the steering committee, as well as Yanil Tiran, who is Executive Director of the Center for Latino Progress on Park Street, right around the corner. And she's one of the newer members, as well as Jeff. I think I've got everyone on the steering committee. Yes, okay. Before we get going with tonight's program, I'd first like to, by the way, please support this organization, meaning Peppercorns Grill, because they're donating the space, and we appreciate it. Every time we have a venue, whether we're at Infinity Music Hall or Spotlight Theaters or any other venue, they're donating the space, so please avail yourself of their fine beverages and meals, and if you wouldn't mind staying for dinner, if you're hungry, please do. Before I get started introducing our guest speaker tonight, first I'd like to talk to you about next program. We have R. Nelson Griebel, who is also known as Oz Griebel. He is the executive, the CEO and president of the Metro Hartford Alliance organization. Many of you know him. He's been around for quite some time. He's agreed to be our speaker on Wednesday, December 13th, always from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And this time will be just around the corner at Spotlight Theaters, the Front Street Bistro at 39 Front Street, where we were last month when we had Suzanne Hopgood, who was somewhere around here. Oh, here she is, Suzanne, chairperson of the Capital Region Development Authority, CRDA, and that was a great program. Incidentally, we'd like to thank Hartford Public Access TV, who is here tonight. Thank you. Thanks to Bill Martinez and his organization. They are taping this program tonight for rebroadcast, and they taped the program with Suzanne Hopgood last month, and that is already available online. You can view that. Just go to HPA-TV, and thank you very much to Gil Martinez and HPA-TV for that. So, let's get into this program, if I may. So, Jay Williams is the president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving since May, thereabouts?
Announced in May, started in July.
Announced in May and started in July, which is one of the largest community foundations in the United States. And let me just read a little bit from his bio. Jay was U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. He brings experience and knowledge in capacity building, workforce readiness, economic security, and urban revitalization. He's also served as Deputy Director of the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs at the White House, where he's the principal liaison between the President of the United States and local elected officials. And one reason he got that job is because he's a former mayor for 5 years of the city of Youngstown, Ohio, just a short distance from where I went to college. He also, what else we got here? The Hartford Foundation, let me just tell you a little bit about the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. Established in 1925, it's a community foundation for Hartford and 28 surrounding communities. Is dedicated to putting philanthropy into action to create lasting solutions that result in vibrant communities within the greater Hartford region. And I don't know if this has been updated, but it has awarded grants of $687 million since its founding back in 1925. Hopefully that was coming up. So tonight, Jay is going to be addressing the topic of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, Thoughts for the Future. And without further ado, Jay Williams, and this will be shortly followed by, after his presentation, by a Q&A session. And I just request that because there's no amplification in this room, that everyone who speaks wait for the mic. I'll go around with a microphone for the speaker for the Q&A period. And Jay will be using a mic the entire time as well. Jay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for the invitation to come out and join you. I was very excited when I got the initial notice, just first and foremost by the title of the group, Live, Work, Love Hartford, because I think that it is important that no matter if you live in the city of Hartford or live in the greater Hartford region, that while it may not be fully realized or appreciated, the interconnectivity, the interdependence that exists amongst Hartford and the surrounding communities is invaluable, it is inescapable, and it is something that I have lived throughout my life in Youngstown, Ohio, and its relationship to its surrounding communities in the Mahoning Valley, the challenges and the opportunities that brings. Nevertheless, that notion of being able to come and address this group was exceptionally appealing to me. So thank you all for that, and thank you for the work that you have done throughout the existence of this group. You've heard about my background. I am 4 months into my tenure at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, having come recently from 6 years in Washington, D.C. with the Obama administration, which ironically brought me to Hartford 2 or 3 times, and even more ironically and somewhat surreal, brought me here to Peppercorns in this room in a luncheon that I sat about right where you are in a long table, and we were talking about a number of economic and community development initiatives. Had a chance at that point, on that and other occasions, to meet with the mayor and the leader of the YMCA and a Boys and Girls Club, so names that are strikingly familiar, and had no idea that less than about a year later that I would be here living and working in Hartford and standing again here in Peppercorns. So, and I told that story because, again, you just never know where life will lead you. And in my time on the ground here, I was intrigued by the community, the city of Hartford and the greater Hartford region, about the challenges and the opportunities. I was struck by the uncanny similarities between Hartford and Youngstown, Ohio, in terms of their rise, their prominence, their place in the region, their place in the country, and then the subsequent struggles and efforts to redefine and capitalize on what are still cities that have solid assets and great opportunities, with some very real structural issues and also some self-inflicted bruises that come along with being a community. Nevertheless, I am exceptionally excited about being here in this community and a part of the Hartford Foundation. So, how many of you have heard of the Hartford Foundation? It's an interesting question, because as I've gone through the community for an institution that's been around for 92 years, there are people who are like, yeah, we've heard of it, but then it's like, so what do you do again? And it's been interesting, and actually my wife gets more frustrated with those individuals. I'm like, honey, we're new here. We can't get, people, they've been around, but maybe they just haven't heard. It's okay. But I asked that, and I'll talk about it in a minute. How many of you happen to have an opportunity to join us a couple of weeks ago, our interview at our annual event, which was our celebration of giving, or Greater Together? So a few of you, good. So clearly I'm glad that you have heard and are familiar with the work of the foundation that has been around for 92 years, that has significant assets that are a direct result of the generosity of individuals over the course of those 9+ decades who have contributed, who have put us in their estate plans, who have bequeathed to us considerable resources. And the foundation has done a terrific job in terms of managing and be a trusted steward of those resources to invest in this community, in the city of Hartford and 28 other communities. One of the challenges that we face is that we are perceived as, well, not perceived because the name is Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. A lot of people think, well, it's Hartford-centric. And while certainly being having our offices in Hartford and having Hartford be the largest of the 28 communities, we do struggle or make it a point to make it known that we serve and engage 28 other communities, each of them having different needs and different priorities, a lot of shared challenges. So that's something that has been a concerted effort for some time, but we are going to be redoubling our efforts to make sure that it is understood that this is a regional asset. We are a regional organization, a regional community foundation, who benefit from folks in Simsbury and Canton and Marlboro and Hebron and so many other places. Are you impressed that I've only been here 4 months and I can name probably 20 to 25 of our 29 off the top of my head, but that interconnectivity is something that we really want to emphasize and capitalize on. So let me start with the fact that in arriving here, I was exceptionally intrigued by the board of directors who very intentionally and deliberately, have an organization that has been exceptionally well run, who also said, we want to reorient the foundation, the opportunity that a new president brings to reintroduce the foundation in ways that are reflective of the current environment. There are challenges and issues facing this community that are different in the terms of scale, intensity, and the fact that these challenges are not only city challenges or state challenge or regional challenges, but state challenges. Also in the context of some very significant national challenges. So not that we haven't faced these things before, but the timing and the sort of the perfect storm of the challenges that we are facing as a city, as a region, as a state, the timing of the Hartford Foundation bringing in new leadership aligned itself where the board made it clear that they weren't looking for a caretaker, that they wanted the foundation to lean into the challenges and the opportunities in ways that we hadn't done before. And I'm talking about some of the things that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, a foundation that has a good reputation, but also needs to look introspectively, to be more flexible, to be more risk tolerant. And I know that that can be a tall order in what is often known as the insurance capital of the world. That's the business of risk aversion. So for us to be more risk tolerant is something that is a leap, but essential to remain a relevant and impactful organization. While there was, no real immediate threat of us not having resources, there is and has been a threat of our relevance being less and less a part of the community, or the impact that we're having being a part of the community. Because we just don't want to say, well, we've done it this way for 92 years, so it worked, and we're patting ourselves on the back and doing good work. We want to be very cognizant that we still have a lot to learn even after 92 years, especially because the environment has changed and the players have changed and the conditions have changed. So as we stand here today, we are an organization that is very much looking introspectively, looking at our place in the region, looking at the role that we play, the obligation and responsibilities that we have, looking to reimagine the relationships that we have with our stakeholders. The greatest asset we have are the employees, the men and women who give their time, their talent, and their service. The things that we do are only made possible by the resources that are part of our assets. But then in order to actually actualize that and see it impact the community, it takes the partnerships that we have with our nonprofits. So our ability to reimagine those partnerships, to reinvigorate and say, you know what, we're going to, take some time to figure out how to be more impactful, how to look at these challenges through a different lens that allows us to say, okay, we're going to lean in and as I said a few weeks ago, make mistakes and take risk, and that's okay. We're going to fall down and pick ourselves up and try again and fall or fail, but we're going to do that in a forward-leaning notion. We're going to use our convening power in ways that we perhaps had not done before. A couple of examples are working with the city. We helped to facilitate, and I moderated a panel on bankruptcy. Not because we had any notion that was what the city was going to ultimately file, but with the very real fiscal and structural challenges, we thought it, at the request of the city, would be important for us to bring in some individuals from other parts of the country who had gone through similar experiences. It was less relevant whether Hartford was actually going to file or not, and more relevant to make sure that there is an informed, objective discussion about the pros and the cons and the unintended consequences and the benefits that would result. Because even if the city doesn't file, there are real structural issues that have to be addressed by way of state intervention and state involvement. And some of the outcomes and approaches are going to be the same, no matter whether it's an actual bankruptcy filing or through the state process as we now are coming to learn about it. Bottom line is that was an issue to bring people together, because it's not just a Hartford issue. It is a regional issue, whether people accept it or buy that notion or not. And the feedback that we got people were exceptionally positive of being able to hear a dialogue about that situation and also have some of their questions addressed. That's just one example of how we are reimagining our role as a convener to lift up issues, some of which will be very difficult discussion topics, but this is our community. And if we as a foundation aren't willing or able or inclined to use the tools that we have, then we would be doing a disservice. So I appreciate the support of the board and the staff, but beyond that, we appreciate the fact that the community has been giving us a very constructive feedback about the value of those types of approaches to the community. They've also been giving us very constructive feedback about where we can improve, where we can do things better. I talked about the philanthropic process, which can often seem Byzantine and very, murky and not quite clear, because at the end of the day, we have significant resources to address significant challenges, but we will never have, resources that match dollar for dollar all of the requests that we get. So looking at our own process to be more flexible, to be, exceptionally transparent, to have the rationale and the understanding of how we make our decisions to ultimately try to move this community forward. The other thing that we're really focusing on is making sure that we are using good information to make those decisions, but also then to measure the impact. We don't want to be in a situation of, well, we've always done it, we've always funded it, we've always supported it, it sounds good, it feels good, it makes people happy, so let's just keep doing it. We have an obligation to make those tough decisions because we're entrusted with donors' money to make an impact, especially the funds that they entrust us with that are unrestricted. We are one of the largest community foundations in the country. We are unique in terms of we might be in the top 25, but we are probably in the top 5 or 10 when it comes to the donors giving us the ability to invest those dollars at the discretion of the board. And I say that because there are larger foundations, but they have donor-advised funds, which we do, where the donors say, nope, this is what it goes to and nothing else. This is what we want to support and nothing else. And while we have that, we have more donors saying, you know what, we trust the judgment, the value assessments that the foundation is making for the benefit of the community, and we want the foundation to have the ability to support, wherever those needs happen to be, and to be able to pivot as those needs change. That is virtually unheard of in the philanthropic world to the extent that we have that ability. And we take that very seriously, and we take that in a very sober manner. But at the same time, we don't want to be so cautious. It's like, okay, so let's just stay, right here in this little lane and make sure that we just kind of do the things that are always, safe and reliable. And that's not saying we're going to be reckless. But if the donors are saying we want you to be impactful and to be reflective and proactive with the needs of the community, that means, coming out of our offices and being close to the issues and the priorities, being informed by the stakeholders who are out there in ways that are, more pronounced than we perhaps have in the past. So again, it isn't a criticism for how we've operated. We operated in a very responsible manner that was consistent with the environment, but the environment's changed, and we need to make sure that we are doing that also. So it's going to be an exciting, it has already been an exciting 4 months. It's going to be an exciting year coming ahead of us as we do the internal work that is necessary to become more nimble, more proactive, more ability to assess risk and move forward in the community, which really just sets the stage for future years. We've been around for 92 years. We're going to be around for another 92 plus because we're going to remain responsible and judicious in terms of how our funds are managed and utilized. But without question, you are going to see a different foundation in terms of our profile, not for self-aggrandizement. That isn't the goal here, is like, hey, look at us, we're the Hartford Foundation. But it is, we are an institution, an anchor institution, working alongside other institutions, some larger, some smaller, to ultimately help shift and impact the trajectory of this community. This is where we live. This is where we work. This is where we play, whether it's Hartford or the greater Hartford region. And I can't think of a better platform that was an appeal to myself and more importantly, my wife and our family to come here and be a part of the catalytic transformation of Hartford. That isn't going to happen overnight, and you all know that. You've been working at this, many of you, for years and years and years. We're going to take, a couple of steps forward and then, a couple steps back. We're still going to have those self-inflicted things that, just sort of drive you crazy. It's like, why can't we just seem to get over this particular issue? Been there, done that, have lived that in Youngstown, Ohio. So when people say, well, Hartford, I was like, yeah, I mean, this is who we are. This is what we do. All the while, though, having an eye toward that achieved potential, the upside that exists in this community. Not being Pollyannish about it, because again, when you come from Youngstown, Ohio, you aren't Pollyannish about anything. There's nothing you can describe here that I haven't seen or can tell you match story for story about, whether it's, political corruption and, you name it. But all the while, these communities have people who are here in this room and so many others have a proud history, have a richness in the culture, have assets that if we, make the tough decisions, if, we're making them, and we hold others, in leadership position to make those tough decisions that aren't necessarily politically expedient, but that are necessary for, a more prosperous and a future filled with greater opportunity. I continue to have no doubt, and my default position is optimism, even in the face of all those things. And it's because of people, that I meet and things that I've seen and work that is already underway before I got here, that I hope to now to put my hands in and help contribute and help to accelerate. So I will end there. I know that, Q&A, and believe me, I'm an open book. Feel free to ask me anything, having been in public office. You just get used to this environment, but this is a friendly crowd. So, but even if it's not, I'm okay with that too. But thank you all very much.
Okay, the toughest question of all is soft versus hard. Soft would be social services, which we need to be continued, and hard things we're going to see a few years down the road. There's always been a tough balance at the foundation, leaning one way or another.
Right.
When you have your druthers, would you spend the money for stuff today or stuff building toward tomorrow?
We've got to do both. I mean, it's a great question, and oftentimes people look at it even within a foundation like, hey, if we start doing this economic development and impact investing and these sort of risky things, what does that mean for our social service, basic human needs, homelessness and domestic violence and all the other things we support? It isn't either or. I mean, this is unique that we have resources that can do both. Now, it is never going to be enough because the endowment is about $1 billion. If we unleashed and spent every dime of that $1 billion tomorrow, 6 months from now, we would still say, okay, we've got all these needs. So to that issue, it isn't either or, it is going to be both. But what we're going to do is try to be better informed about where we can leverage those dollars to get the greatest benefit. Where can those partnerships that exist be enhanced? What are other approaches that we can take to continue to make sure we address the basic everyday needs of the least, in the community who, have the least in the community, not the least in terms of their value to society, but that have the least or face the greatest challenges. But you have to invest in your future, because if you're so busy sort of just taking care of those day-to-day little things and you never have an eye toward creating catalytic investments for the future, you will always just be sort of chasing those day-to-day issues. So you have to do both, and that means in doing both that some of it might be different than we've got in the past, and some people might get uncomfortable with that, but those are decisions that we have to make to take the risk to invest in our future.
Hi, I'm Donna Starr with the Park and Rec Advisory Commission. And I really liked the last question, Mike's question, and I'm going to get very specific.
Sure.
The city, as you know, is broke, and we have a park trust fund which takes care of the park capital improvement projects. But we have absolutely nothing like that for recreation. And I know that your organization has supported many organizations who provide recreation, but we really could use some support with the city. in that venue. And in the past, I would not have thought of approaching your organization because, sorry, your process is too convoluted.
I get that. And for those of you that attended last week, we put up a slide that says sometimes our process can look like, this very convoluted. So we meet with the mayor on a monthly basis, and I know it's the mayor and the legislative body who I've met with also, to talk about ways that we can be more impactful. And you're not suggesting this, but no, I put out in one of our statement positions, we are not going to step in to support fiscally things that have been and continue to be public domains. The city, and I say this not pejoratively, but the city's got to make tough decisions. The city, while broke, still has resources and has to decide. They've got to make police, fire, recreation, all those other things. And I can say that because I was a mayor that had to make those decisions. So we're not going to step in and just become, supplant city funds because the city, doesn't have the same resources. But what we are doing is having conversations with the city about things that do add to the long-term quality of life. One of them happened to be youth employment. Another, very much can be a discussion around recreational opportunities, which is about a quality of life, which you can also tie to, economic viability for the city. So no conversations are off the table. I tell my staff, it's like, there's zero risk or cost in having a conversation. It might be some wild, crazy idea, but it's like, okay, so we invest a little time. That doesn't mean we're going to do everything. So those types of conversations have started and are ongoing. And, we very much welcome to ultimately figure out, not that we can just go through and say, oh, the city will take this line out of, this line out of, this line out of, and turn over to the Hartford Foundation, but where it speaks to the long-term viability of the city and the region, we very much welcome those conversations. And some of them have to do with public safety. That's currently on the table, and other things like that. But, I understand wholeheartedly how important, the recreation is a part of being able to maintain the families and the residents of the city, to attract others who may be considering a city, and others who may not, choose to live in a city, but still, find that as something that they would, love to partake in.
Hi, Leslie Hammond. Thank you so much, and welcome to Hartford. I was at the forum on bankruptcy, and I didn't realize you all had facilitated it, but I remember you being there, and it was such an awesome forum. I don't know if anybody else went, but God, I was like, we need to do this more, because there's been floating about bankruptcy and nobody seemed to know, and to have people that, from cities that had struggled. So that was great. So I'd love to see more of that. You might already know this, but we do know that you guys have $1 billion, and we're thinking that you're going to save us.
Cat's out of the bag, right? They don't let you travel with a checkbook. I mean, it's like, oh, you're president, but you don't get to have a checkbook.
That's the word on the street.
Right.
So I really need to somehow get transparency. I don't know, what you all have done in the past, but the fact that you have 28 towns, the fact that you're not going to just give Parks and Rec a check, to try to get that message out, because of course being in such
I appreciate you bringing that up, and that is so critical. And about a month ago, I wrote with the help of the staff, penned a op-ed or statement piece that addressed and spoke to our statement, our position on the fiscal issue. And there was a little bit of hesitation or a little bit of debate within our staff about how explicitly to address that. And I said, no, but ultimately the consensus was we do need to put that on the table. Yes, we have in one sense, $1 billion is a lot of money. So people are like, wow, it's $1 billion. We got all these problems. You guys just start, we'll start lining up. And we said that, that in and of itself, first of all, it would betray the obligation that we have to our donors who made the contribution with the expectation that our endowment would be an enduring resource in perpetuity. So one, it's not even something that would technically probably be possible. Even if it was, like I said a few minutes ago, it would be a drop in the bucket to the issues. There are structural issues in Hartford that the $1 billion would be a Band-Aid that would make everyone feel good for a while, and that's just assuming you put it in just Hartford. And again, the 20 other communities are like, hey, wait a minute here. A lot of that money came from us, so how is it all going into Hartford? But even if that was the case, it would be just a temporary salve, on a structural issue. So we want to be and are attempting to be very transparent that, yes, we're going to have conversations about how to sustain and leverage, but we are not going to, portray or suggest that, that $1 billion is going to be the salvation, because, from a state standpoint, there's got to be tough decisions. I still, am a little bit perplexed about the irrational fear of tolls here in the state of Connecticut. A couple people explained it to me, but I'm like, so Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, every state that surrounds you got tolls. We all have got, the little transponders now, but, so, and I just say that sort of tongue in cheek that there is a discussion about, yep, we have this money. It is absolutely an asset that we're going to put to use. And internally, we're asking questions like, okay, well, let's make sure that we are looking at ways that just don't say, well, we just done it this little much, so let's keep doing that. Let's challenge ourselves. But you're right, in terms of the transparency, while it is a lot of money and it sounds like a lot of money, at the end of the day, when you think of 29 communities and all the needs that are out there and the obligations that yet and still the state and towns have, it becomes like less of a, oh, well, perhaps it isn't like that. So yeah, but that's a great point.
Hi, I'm Linda Baer, and probably I'm here tonight for Hartford besides, but I also work for the mayor. And let me just comment, we have a really good turnout here tonight. I think the $1 billion has something to do with it.
It's not me. I'm crushed.
Although I will say that the yard goats brought everybody out as well. I've been working in Hartford for 40 years. I've been living in Wethersfield for half of that time. And I'm very pleased at this. You've used the word regionalism like multiple times in your comments, and I think that's a good thing. And you also talked about the foundation being a convener. And I'm wondering if you've given any thought to some creative ways that the foundation might be able to bring the suburbs and the city together. I mean, I have to admit that I sleep in Wethersfield, right. But that's about it. And people are very reluctant to feel that they have any incentive to help Hartford.
Absolutely, and again, I love this discussion because that is a conversation that I have had multiple times, and even within the past couple of hours, throughout the day, that notion. So we are currently discussing and exploring ways. More important than that, we are open to ideas of what we could do to use that convening power in creative and innovative ways, in compelling ways, to facilitate those discussions. I'll tell you, one of the most exciting emails that I've received since being here came day before yesterday from a first selectman in one of the wealthier suburbs who said, Jay, welcome, and let me take a step back. So I invited the chief elected official of every one of our 29 communities, a personal invitation to join us a couple weeks ago at our annual meeting. A lot of them couldn't make it. They had conflicting, a few of them did. Many of them responded with just appreciation for that invitation. But more importantly than that, one of them who was unable to make it sent me an email and said, hey, on December 4th, we're scheduling the swearing in of all of our elected officers. And the person said that, his theme is cooperation across political lines, socioeconomic lines, town lines. He said, in effect, we are all in this together, and would you come out and, address that and sort of give us a keynote speech on that day? The fact that that unsolicited invitation came from an elected official of a wealthier town that could have very well said, hey, it's cool, we got this, but we're doing okay out here. Oh yeah, it's nice. but who is taking a stand and saying the theme here, as far as he is concerned, is all about cooperation. And would you come out? So I'm scheduled to be in Chicago that day and wasn't scheduled to get back till 9 or 10 that night. But to me, that is more important than whatever I've got to do in Chicago. So I told him, I said, before I even checked my staff, I said, you know what? Yep, I'll be there. So, then I copied my staff. It's like, hey, could you figure out a way to get me back from like Chicago so I can come? But that's just an example that there are those out there that, have that notion. And to the extent that he thought to invite us out to do that, I'm going to use that example as we go through. And that's just one small but powerful example from, that might cost a little political capital. Some folks that may say, hey, we're good out here in this town. So other ways and thoughts that we could use our convening power and our resources, please, let us know. We are right now, part of what I said in last week at the Greater Together celebration is that we're going to go to every one of those 29 towns and have a convene. I just call it a town hall meeting, but that's just a generic broad term. But have a convening, a listening session with the stakeholders, the elected officials, the nonprofits, the community leaders, the grassroots leaders, the residents, whoever wants to show up to demonstrate our physical presence, hear from them, and then ask the question, how can we be more helpful? How can we be more valuable? So every one of those 29 communities is going to, we are going to be there asking and coming humbly, not with, hey, we're here with our $1 billion, but hey, we've got some resources, but what is it that you need? How can we be more helpful? But also with some expectations, okay, we got it, but you understand you're a part of the region. So while we talk about and figure out ways to address it, don't take it like, oh, thanks, Hartford, we got ours, and we go back to sort of, oh, Manchester, you guys got to figure that out. East Hartford, my God, that's like way on the other side of the river. Like I said, you got to cross the river to get to some of these places, which like, yeah, okay. So more ideas are welcome.
Hi, so I'm Liz DuPont-Deal. I work in Hartford, but I live in Windsor. So you're finding all the things we couldn't tell you before you came here, or we'd have to kill you. So
right.
Thank you. So I want to talk about two things. I want to piggyback on what Linda said and say I'm from Windsor. There's a couple other people here from Windsor tonight. And I think you can't pay attention and not be really concerned that Hartford is like out on a raft, and that's just not okay. So I'm delighted to hear that you're using your convening power and looking at all of that. And please utilize us. That's great. The second thing I wanted to mention was I was delighted to hear you mention impact investing. So, I know Alex and a couple other people here know what I would be talking about when I talk, social impact bonds or impact investing or long reach for Connecticut. But you can't look at our budget situation now and not think about something like that. Right. I mean, one of my favorite, I've been following this for a long time, and one of my favorite examples is Cuyahoga County, where you guys had the Gun Foundation get people together right. and look at where you were spending your money, what was effective, and as a result of that, you now have people working for the county government that have systems talking to each other that never did before. So, what are the odds of something like that? If you could explain a little bit about that. It's right. It has been not broad support in Connecticut, but people are listening a lot more now that the budget is what it is.
Right, and I'm only peripherally familiar with it. So, having spent some time working in Cleveland and then traveling and engaging the folks both at the city level and at Cuyahoga County level, the Gun Foundation has been an exceptional leader. And one of the things that we are doing right now are reaching out to our fellow community foundations here in the state, but across the country. The Gretzky Foundation in Detroit, the Gun Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, to have those discussions about how they've approached that from a systemic level, how they've gotten the interconnectivity and the communication. And, is as straightforward as it might seem, as logical as it might seem, that right, right. And I'll tell you, I'll pull the curtain back a little bit, hopefully without getting in trouble with my staff. Not only that, I mean, some of the challenges we have within the foundation. So I'm figuring out, hey, before we start, going out and preaching, and trying to figure this out within the region or across the country, we got some house cleaning to do here, some home improvements to do in terms of our own sharing and communication. So, I'm starting, at home, literally and figuratively, with the foundation, but you're right. So, without being intimately familiar with those conversations or those, requests to engage in those conversations are a part of what we're doing now, because at the end of the day, you're right, you have to, it's hard to tell people, well, let's look at the future when the house is on fire as you speak. But yet and still, you have to do both. You have to address the immediate needs and the structural needs, and that's part of the frustration, is that there are all sorts of budgetary gimmicks and things you can do to make the problem seem to disappear and off the front headlines. And, citizens who have their own issues, they're like, oh boy, they solved that. And it's really just, kicked down the road a little bit or masked in a way that doesn't force, the current, elected officials to make the tough decisions that might be politically untenable. But, that's what leadership is about making those decisions and not being so ideologically pure in a political sense that, oh, well, that's, at the end of the day, if the decision might cost you your seat, but ultimately helps to structurally address the, the needs of the state, you have done the highest calling, as opposed to, well, what preserves my seat or my ability to be reelected. And again, I say that having put myself in that same position. The issues that I had to face were Youngstown. I was the elected mayor of Youngstown, but I also understood that Youngstown's role in the region. So, I often, or at a number of times, took positions that weren't politically popular, but that I thought would help secure the future of the city and the region. And, I've got the scars to prove it. So part of the regionalism, if I said that, it was interesting because there was a time in Youngstown, I couldn't use the word regionalism. I mean, it was like all the suburb servers, oh, you want us to bail out the city. Oh, you guys, you screwed yourselves up. You made your bed, now you got to lie in it. Turn the lights off when the last person comes out of the city. So I'm like, man, that's like, gee whiz. I just want to have a conversation about how we, you have no problem coming to university or coming to the museum or the Youngstown Symphony or the Butler Art, So Youngstown is like, okay then, but anything beyond that, it's like you guys don't want to hear it. So, it is, that notion of having those conversations and addressing, the long term, and we are very much in the board, to their credit, this notion of impact investing and both, we've been blessed on the financial, the returns that have put us in a very, very good position. Now, again, we are at the mercy of the financial markets, and we do all the things necessary to diversify and make sure we can try to, weather any national or global downturn. But again, we're subject to that. But also now with a keen interest on that the social and the impact investing, and not just through our nonprofit partners, which is an important mechanism, but us ourselves, saying, okay, this is not us through some third party. This is us rolling up our sleeves, putting our hands in, and want to do it in a very informed yet thoughtful way.
Speaker, question here.
Hi, Jay.
Hey.
Thanks so much for coming to talk with us tonight. First off, I'd like to say that one thing, I'm out of the nonprofit management business that I was in for a long time, but during the time I was doing that, the nonprofit support program that the Hartford Foundation runs was absolutely awesome. Don't mess with that.
I promise I won't.
When I talk to folks in other parts of the country and tell them what the Hartford Foundation does through the nonprofit support program, right, they all start crying. So that things like the technology grants and such are just amazing. I'd like to speak a little bit about the potential for the foundation to function as a convener on a regional level. I introduced myself to you as the senior warden at Church of the Good Shepherd. I have another hat. I'm chair of the Tree Advisory Commission for the city.
Okay.
We have been trying to figure out how to come up with a solid mechanism to manage the urban forest. And Hartford's resources have been getting squeezed in that area. And what we've developed is a concept about a cooperative forestry crew for the region. We just don't have a lever to work with on that. A mechanism that would allow for there to be a coordinated force that would really deal, particularly for emergencies or big jobs or whatever. At any rate, I don't want to get into any detail on that, but I'd like to suggest the potential for the Hartford Foundation to function as a convener. Hi, I've got $1 billion. Would you like to talk about this kind of issue? I know it's possible because there's a couple of towns that are actually doing cooperative work in that area.
That's what we're here for. Again, we welcome those conversations of using, and you're right, those assets do bring people to the table for a discussion that otherwise might not come. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I'm here. That's exactly why we're here. I also appreciate, the first part of your comment. I get a lot of that. Oh, welcome to Connecticut. The Hartford Foundation has been wonderful to us. And I said, I'm smart enough to read between the lines. They're like, yeah, welcome, but just don't screw things up. So you just were more explicit. Other people have been like, yeah, they've been good to us. You just said, like, listen, just don't screw it up, which I appreciate. I know exactly where you're coming from. And our NSP program is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the entirety of the foundation, but I hear consistently about NSP. So I have, I do what they tell me to do. I show up when they tell me to show up. This is how bold they are. Yeah, so I'm the president of Hartford Foundation. I'm running the place, but I go to one of their functions. They're like, yeah, we've got like 2 minutes, and here's your 2 minutes. And like, if you go over 2 minutes, it's us, it's you and me. So I go 2 minutes and a couple seconds less because I don't want to get on the bad side of my NSP folks. So yeah, I got you. I won't screw it up.
Carl Carriere, and I live, work, and play in Hartford. I have been a recipient. I like what I've heard. I have been a recipient of those wonderful grants as a former nonprofit director in Hartford. So yes, keep the nonprofit support organization going. We also were funded by the Hartford Foundation. We were also defunded by the Hartford Foundation. But I'm not there. I was also a president of a national nonprofit, and I would go around the country, and our nonprofit in Hartford was asked to come to Washington, D.C. because we were considered a national model. And when I would speak, I would say, I'm from Connecticut, where collaboration is considered an unnatural act between two consenting or unconsenting, non-consenting adults. I don't know what it's like in your community, but we don't have a county form of government, so I think it's legit. Convening is one thing, and the Hartford Foundation has done that. And I think I would like you to consider going further, that when you convene, you also have pots of money for people to collaborate, because that's part of it. The foundation historically has had a hands-off approach to kind of not directing policy. And I would say in Hartford, we suffer from a brain drain. I think in the area, we suffer, as you talked about the toll thing. I just don't get that either. And you can see, the state budget situation and the Hartford's budget situation speaks to that. I think we need a balance of research and a balance of community involvement. But I really would like the foundation to step forward and put some best practices, promising practices out there, and encourage, with pots of money, to encourage organizations.
You got it. You are 100% correct. And as I talk about convening, I'm glad you pointed it out, because we don't just mean, there's the convening for the, not for the sake, but the convening power, but there's also then putting our money where our mouth is, putting incentives on the table. We don't really, the old adage of, the carrot or the stick, we don't necessarily have a stick, but we do have a carrot, or I guess it could be a stick if we say, if you don't do this, we're not gonna, give it to you, and but you're right. So I agree, I concur, and you will see that. Yeah, there's always a notion of, picking winners and losers. We don't want to be perceived as, oh, we've got the money, so, the golden rule. We've got the goals, so we make the rules. We don't want that. But there's also a danger in too much of a laissez-faire, sort of hands-off, no, sometimes you need to be like, so this is what, we believe, or here's what we'd like to see, and here's what the research or the data suggests, and here are other best practices that we're willing to put out there, because at the end of the day, we do technically pick winners and losers. That's a harsh term, but there are things that we fund and things that we don't. So if you just use it in that regard, the things that we fund, they could say those are the winners, things we don't, are not the winners. But yeah, so you will see a more involved, roll up our sleeves, hands-on approach without being paternalistic, without being authoritarian. We don't want that and won't go down that road. That's not of value or use, and it's not where we would be at our best. But yeah, I think, the convening with the incentives and being more willing to sort of, take a position, and if it's wrong and we can take a more informed position because of better data and information, great. I mean, I'm not so, proud that I can't say, hey, we got that one wrong, and we can do better next time.
Well, I'd like to thank Jay.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd like to remind you once again.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So I would get in trouble if I walk out with a full envelope and then I come back with the same. So here's just some information that talks broadly about the strategic plan and some of the things. So please, it's an easy read or just a good reference point. Want you to know we have those as we go into next year and update our strategic plan. So again, thank you all very much.
Okay, we have some exhibits here, flyers to pass around for first night.